The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Rudy's Revelation.
Hey everyone, welcome to today's podcast. It is Tuesday. Welcome to the podcast. Well, today it's evident that the liberals are stoking political violence. The communist Chinese hit back. Over 30 stories to get through today, 30 headlines. Let's get into the news. We're going to start out with a headline from the Baltimore Sun. Fire at Pennsylvania governor's home raises questions on political violence. 100 miles north of Annapolis, the Pennsylvania governor's mansion in Harrisburg faced a fiery attack, raising questions about political violence across the country. New York Post reports on the attack. The Pennsylvania madman who firebombed Governor Shapiro's home is domestic terrorist and should be sent to El Salvador hellhole prison, says the fire chief there. Let's just get into the story, though. Pennsylvania man was actually a Pennsylvania man and not an El Salvadoran, but we'll get to that later. Accused of firebombing Governor Josh Shapiro's mansion, was out on bail when he allegedly carried out the arson. Cody Bomber, his mother, meanwhile, said she desperately tried to get police to lock her son up prior to the attack. Bomber, 38, made sick faces as he was hauled back into Harrisburg courtroom for his arraignment Monday, when he was hit with 8 charges, including terrorism, aggravated arson, criminal homicide, and prowling at night. He went on to say, medication led me to different types of behaviors, Bomber told the court. Right, you juice people up on pharmaceuticals, and then you propagandize them and goad them into attacking, and this is exactly what happens. So if you didn't know, Governor Josh Shapiro is the Pennsylvania governor, and he's a Democrat. So I don't know who this guy is, if Bomber is a Republican or a Democrat. We don't really know. This guy's obviously mentally ill. But mentally ill people are influencing the same people that mentally stable people are. Plus, we have more violence. One American News is reporting neo-Nazi Wisconsin teen murdered parents to obtain the financial means and autonomy necessary to assassinate Trump. Now we're having this confusing thing happen. We're having leftists target Democrat politicians, and you're having supposed right-wingers attacking or planning to attack Trump. So take a look at this guy. He's obviously insane. According to Waukesha County authorities in Wisconsin, 17-year-old Nikita Kassep was previously arrested in March on 2 counts of first-degree murder, along with 2 counts of hiding a corpse. Kassep's stepfather, 51-year-old Donald Mayer, and his mother, 35-year-old Tatina Kassep, were found dead in their home on March 1st by the Waukesha County Sheriff's Department. After the discovery, the Sheriff's Department issued a search warrant finding evidence on Kassep's phone revealing that he was connected to the Order of Nine Angels, which investigators claim is a network of individuals holding new Nazi racially motivated extremist views. The court documents reveal that Kassup referenced a manifesto for the assassination of President Trump, along with plans to create bombs and coordinate terrorist attacks to start a revolution in order to save the white race. Another race war. Doesn't this sound like Charlie Manson in the 70s, who was being run by the CIA? And it goes on to say he was in touch with other parties about his plan to kill the president and overthrow the government. I wonder who those parties could be. Would they be associated with the United States government? Maybe. I don't know. The Federalist is reporting Taylor Lorenz's fawning over alleged United assassin is normalizing political violence. Now, this is the crux of the matter here. It's not just Taylor Lorenz. Like before the attempted assassination on Trump and Butler, I said Joy Reid should be held accountable, because what you do is you have people on SSRI, pharmaceuticals, and then they're subject to the same propaganda we all are, either online or on cable news. And you don't have to watch cable news because it's all respun online anyway. And so you have Taylor Lorenz, and as much as I like the Federalist, the fact that they're promoting this even more so, Taylor Lorenz fawning over alleged United healthcare assassin is normalizing political violence. It is. Just like all the other media personalities who are out there that have a liberal point of view, and just so, well, you know, they're Nazis, and in this case, one guy is a real Nazi, but it's someone I don't like, so I don't care if they're killed, or I don't care if they die, or I don't care about it's lessening the whole value of life. So the Federalist goes on to say Lorenz's dismissive attitude is not just tasteless, it's part of a broader, calculated effort by the left to normalize political violence and numb the American public to its rising frequency. Couldn't have said it better myself. That's exactly true. It is a calculated effort, whether they're even people like her, whether they're witting or unwitting. The networks, the corporations, deep state, know what to do. So they just tell her, we need you to go out there and do this, or CNN prompts her. National Review reports on it. A good man like Luigi Mangione is hard to find. So says Taylor Lorenz. Former Washington Post columnist and current independent writer Taylor Lorenz. Now you're saying she's independent, like she worked for the Washington Post. You know the Washington Post is replete with intelligence assets. So whether she's on her own or not is irrelevant. Once in the CIA, always in the CIA, or FBI for that matter. Taylor Lorenz has been a Mangione apologist since the 26-year-old suspected assassin allegedly gunned down Thompson on the streets of Manhattan in December. Lorenz piled on the praise for Mangione in a CNN interview last weekend, which I referred to. It's a calculated effort, whether she's an independent writer or not an independent writer. CNN is probably as closely associated with the CIA as the Washington Post is. And there's more. Georgia man accused of threatening to kill Tulsi Gabbard and her family. Akbar Mohammed Abmin, 24, of Lilburn, is accused of sending threats that include statements, you and your family are going to die soon and I'll personally do the job if necessary. One statement said, prepare to die, Tulsi, and everyone you hold dear, America will burn. And what I'm trying to also accentuate here is, do you know how diversified all these political extremists, political terrorists, domestic terrorists are? It's, oh, you have a Muslim guy, you got a neo-Nazi, you got an old guy, you have a homeless man, you got these people, that person. Like of every, so you can't pin down what the commonality is. Well, the commonality is liberal rhetoric. And of course, I believe there are other factors, but certainly the political rhetoric coming out of the mainstream media. Fox News reports teen suspect on bond after allegedly stabbing Texas track star Austin Metcalf to death. Carmelo Anthony's bond was dropped from $1 million to $250,000, which he actually raised, I think it was on GoFundMe. The fact that this was this murder, I don't understand how people could murder somebody or shoot somebody and then several days later be back out on the street. You do not need to be out of jail to conduct your defense. He's obviously mentally ill if he just pulled out a knife and stabbed some guy for no reason. Well, I'm sure there was a reason to him, but. And there's more. The National Review reports, I don't know if you know who Peter Singer is, but let me just get to the article. Peter Singer endorses geriatric suicide in the New York Times. So if you didn't know who he was, he's the internationally influential emeritus bioethics professor from Princeton. He is known as a moral philosopher, which is in the case an oxymoron, of course. Not only has he repeatedly endorsed the moral propriety of infanticide, but he has also yawned at bestiality and suggested experimenting in cognitively disabled people rather than animals if they are not persons, among other ethically depraved opinions. Lunatic, so he's advocating for elder suicide, assisted suicide, even if there's no medical suffering involved. Singer and other philosopher, Professor Katarzyna de Lazary-Radek, just took to the opinion pages of the New York Times to endorse geriatric suicide. Seems a noted 90-year-old psychologist named Daniel Kahneman committed assisted suicide last year. At one of Switzerland's death clinics, Kahneman wasn't seriously ill or debilitated, but feared the infirmities that he believed were coming. So he wasn't even sick, but he wanted to kill himself before he got sick. It's like Angelina Jolie cutting off her boobs because she had the fear of getting breast cancer. So off to Switzerland, this guy flew. Kahneman, Singer, and Lazario-Radek heartily approve. And so they based their opinion on this guy's trip to Switzerland to commit assisted suicide because he was old. You might have heard a refrain like this coming from Rahm Emanuel. Not Rahm Emanuel, it's his brother. I forget his first name. All right, the other big news now, you have don't forget though, socialism is a conspiracy. So although they may seem disparate, people on the left are all associated, loosely or tightly or whatever. So the Chinese communists and the American liberals aren't that far apart. Certainly the Chinese communists and the European socialists are not that far apart. So you have to keep that in mind when you're looking at the news. And this next story. The New York Post reports China halts Boeing deliveries as trade war with the U.S. intensifies. What exactly does this mean? Well, as I explained earlier, the Korean War was left, I guess, in a détente, a cease of hostilities, but the war was never over. So in the Korean War, people might not know this, it was the Europe and the United States specifically against the communist aggression in the Korean Peninsula. But toward the end of the war, when the West had pushed the North Koreans all the way back to the Ozan Reservoir, there's a reservoir right at the end of Korea where China begins. And then a million Chinese troops poured over the border. And then we were at war with China. And then MacArthur wanted to nuke China, whatever. But the war never really ended. So technically, even though we did all these wonderful things for China, we were still technically at war with China. And the Chinese communists have always seen it as that. That even through the 50s when the CIA was helping them, and then in the 70s when Nixon and Kissinger said, hey, we would like your billion people to either buy our stuff or make our stuff. And that's where we are today. Anyway, going to the next headline here from the Washington Post. In the latest salvo against tariffs, China assails peasants in the U.S. Oh, yeah. Listen to this rhetoric. A senior Chinese official warned Tuesday that that President Donald Trump's tariffs would backfire and that soon those peasants in the U.S. would wail in front of the 5,000 years of Chinese civilization. Chinese top official overseeing Hong Kong and Macau, Ji Belong, lashed out at the U.S. during a speech on national security in which he linked the 2019 pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong that Beijing saw as a continued U.S. efforts to suppress China. Suppress. First of all, the 2019, I'm not saying the U.S. didn't support. It didn't seem like they really supported the protests in Hong Kong, the democracy protests. But the democracy protests in Hong Kong started after the communist infiltration of the island, and the government there started putting into place anti-democratic measures, taking the vote away from people, being able to organize, to speak freely, outlawing opposition parties, et cetera, et cetera. Because even in Hong Kong, the communists, they weren't in full control, but they had their proxy in there. And their proxy forces were going around Hong Kong, undermining, democratic protests and activities, et cetera. Anyway, U.S. isn't after our terrorists, but our very survival, he said. The U.S. has repeatedly contained and suppressed Hong Kong, and this will eventually backfire on itself. First of all, Hong Kong is a great city. It's an island, but it's great because of the British, not necessarily because of China. It's the crown jewel of China for hundreds of years because of the British. And it was actually the drugged up peasants of China that eventually shook off the opium, which was spread about by the British, by the way, but not going to get into the opium wars. But until, China was a peasant country until the 70s, until American dollars started flooding into the country. Zero Hedge is reporting Mizuho, pretty high confidence data will show China is dumping U.S. treasuries. Now, this is a question that was going on for some time. We listened to Jameson, the trade representative that for the United States, that China's been dumping tariffs for some time, but I think what Zero Hedge is saying here, that the evidence is going to show that after some investigation that the rate in which China is dumping U.S. treasuries is higher, and is higher since the trade war began. And as much as I don't like war, trade, or kinetic war, or whatever, this had to be done. We need to decouple from China. The fact that we ever went there in the first place is evidence of the conspiracy, but in any case. The Federalist is reporting Republican debut transparency bill after uncovering millions of secret spending on China. What is this? Biden administration funneled $18 million in U.S. tax dollars, approximately $4 million of which Republican Senator Joni Ernst's staff found buried or absent from the federal government's funding database to causes in communist China. Majority of the payments were funneled through the U.S. Departments of State and Health and Human Services to various Chinese entities and China-based projects for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. accessibility training, including some at U.S. consulate, art billboards, bicycle parking cover, pro-LGBT events, various climate change initiatives, and rat research, and reported all on USA spending.gov. Buried in that federal spending database, however, is more of Americans' hard-earned money that the National Institute of Health handed to at least one Chinese university. So there's the conspiracy. Why are U.S. tax dollars going to our adversary? As we've seen, going to Hamas, and it's always hidden and nested in different shell companies or through different pass-throughs like NGOs or whatever. And I've been ringing the alarm bell on China for years. Nobody wants to listen, when there's money to be made. And then we're going to go to the next Zero Hedge article. China limits stock sale to maintain impression of stability as Besant hints at boosting treasury buybacks if Fed does nothing. So, yeah, the U.S. government will do treasury buybacks. I think they should consider doing that anyway. And China manipulates their markets and their currency, and that's one of the things that you don't like to do, because talk about protectionism. High tariff barriers are not nearly as important as currency manipulation. But China will do anything to win, and so that's what they're doing. And like I said, they've known we've been at war for some time, so between the espionage, stealing copyright, and copyright infringement, and stealing intellectual property, IP, they'll do anything. They can't win on an even playing field. They know that. And they have an inferiority complex when it comes to America. So you put those two things together and they'll do anything. And most leftists do, because leftists are extremists. They don't have boundaries. You know what I mean? Post-Millennial is reporting Trump administration says U.S. has more than 10 amazing tariff deals. Recession 100% not happening. We'll not have a recession. What I want to say about this is, first of all, we were in a recession already. Okay? Because the standard for recession, or the prerequisite, was 2 quarters of negative growth. We had that under Joe Biden, and then they just changed the definition. They go, well, no, there are other extenuating circumstances. No, that was never the prerequisite before. Post-Millennial goes on to say the Trump administration's director of the National Economic Council, Kevin Hassett, said on Monday that following President Donald Trump's decision to place substantial tariffs on imports from numerous countries, the U.S. received very good, amazing trade proposals from more than 10 countries. In an interview with Fox Business, Hassett also confidently dismissed concerns about a potential economic downturn per CNBC. He said there were 100% certainty that the U.S. will not plunge into a recession in 2025. Look at the real economic indicators. Inflation rate down significantly, more than predicted. Job numbers up significantly, more than predicted. And also the unemployment rate is going up slightly, which is a good sign that inflation is fundamentally going down. Federalist report shows network news maximum slant on Trump tariffs. And this is where you just had the reference there, CNBC reporting that, we're going to go into a recession. They'd have to be a lot of multiple factors that start going wrong. And trade imbalance or trade correction is just one sector. And that's not going to affect everything. As Newsbusters review shows, ABC, CBS, and NBC devoted 62 times more coverage to Trump tariffs and market declines than booming job numbers, as I referenced just a second ago, and also the inflation rate. which are more important than the stock market. And also don't forget that the mortgage rates also decreasing slightly, but that's another good indicator. And also more people coming into the workforce. That's not as important, but significant indicator. One American News, Trump unveils new tariffs on foreign electronics, boosting U.S. chip industry. Also from OAN, NVIDIA announces plans to manufacture AI supercomputer chips entirely in the U.S. following Trump's tariffs. The Federalist, unsealed crossfire hurricane docs further prove Russiagate was a hoax all along. If you didn't know, we all knew. Despite a complete lack of actual corroborating evidence, leftists spent years fomenting delusions that the New York-born billionaire, Trump, while in cahoots with the Kremlin, had masterminded a scheme to undermine American democracy and deny Hillary Clinton the White House. Even worse was many of the conspiracies were aided by the U.S. intelligence agencies like the FBI, which concocted a years-long investigation crossfire hurricane into Trump's first presidency using baseless evidence bought and paid for by the Clinton campaign hired law firm, and also some FBI doctored FISA applications. We all knew Russiagate was what it was, and all the money they spent and the Mueller thing, and then it continued during Trump's latest campaign with all the lawfare. It's like the fact that people even bought into that, like whether you like Trump or not, you could say, hey, there's something wrong here. All right, the Federalist. Bill Maher shouldn't be applauded for taking 10 years to realize Trump isn't literally Hitler. And if you don't know what Maher said, I'll just get into it. Just for starters, Trump laughs. I've never seen him laugh in public, but he does, including at himself, and it's not fake. Everything I've ever not liked about him was, as I swear to God, absent, at least on the night with this guy. I've had so many conversations with prominent people who are as much less connected, people who don't look at you in the eye, people who really don't listen because they just want to get on to their next thing and they're preparing what they have to say in their head. None of that with Trump, he said. And I said I was going to report on this until Maher came out with a statement, and he did come out with a statement last night on his show. All right, immigration. Fox News. Previously deported Brazilian woman charged with sex crimes against Massachusetts child. Very disturbing case. You should look into it. Washington Post. Doge is collecting federal data to remove immigrants from housing and jobs. Trump administration is using personal data collected for dissemination from undocumented immigrants where they work, study, and live, often with the goal of removing them from their housing and the workforce. Indeed. Because especially if that housing is part of the welfare state. At the Department of Housing and Urban Development, for example, officials are working on a rule that would ban mixed status households in which some family members have legal status and others don't for public housing. Right. We shouldn't be affording public housing to people that are here illegally. And that's the point. And so it's getting them out regardless of who they're living with. Because the reason is to get them out. So they could voluntarily deport, and then their spouses or their significant others or whatever, whoever they're living with, won't be kicked out as well. Social Security numbers are, Doge got Social Security numbers of 6,000, mostly Latino immigrants, into a database that tracks dead people, effectively slashing their ability to receive benefits and work legally in the United States. Yes. Now, if somebody's here, first of all, if somebody's here legally and not a citizen, they could still be deported. People don't understand that. Like I said, if you're here legally, you're here at the pleasure of the United States government. And if you piss off the United States government, they can kick you out. Legal or otherwise. One American News, Customs Border Patrol, 2 women with U.S. citizenship arrested following an attempt to smuggle children. Really? Smuggle children? 2 American citizens were arrested by the Border Patrol after reportedly attempting to smuggle 2 unaccompanied minors into the United States. All right, they're mothers who are trying to get their children. The girls, the 2 preteen girls, or I think one was 14, okay, had no connection to these people. And the other was 12. New York Times, Colombia activist arrested by ICE at his appointment for citizenship. Mashuan Waldawi, a legal permanent resident, has lived in the United States for 10 years and was arrested in Vermont. He's a legal permanent resident, not a citizen. So if Maldawi is maybe a, I don't know, terrorist, is he a Colombia activist, okay, is connected to Hamas? Hard to say. It's a national security issue. If you didn't see this, Reuters, El Salvador's Bukele says he will not return the man U.S. mistakenly deported. This is from Reuters. The reasoning behind this is the person that was referred to as a Maryland man was actually a Salvadoran citizen and was deported to his home country, El Salvador, where he may or may not be in prison. But Bukele, the president of El Salvador, says, I'm not flying a Salvadoran citizen back to the United States because the judge says so. You have no jurisdiction here. Case closed. Sorry, liberals. Oh, he wasn't an MS-13 gang member? He wasn't? Okay. But he's not an American citizen, Salvadoran citizen, and he's back in his home country. Let Bukele figure out whether he's an MS-13 or not. Wall Street Journal, little-known bureaucrats tearing through American universities. A new task force formed to combat anti-Semitism is using funding threats to force broader changes on campus. The Trump administration is going gangbusters. So the problem here really is rooting out, it's not just even anti-Semitism as much as anti-Americanism. You can't be a foreign national, be in this country, and protest the United States government, or in this instance, more particularly, aid in the enemies of the United States. Hamas, for most part. Don't forget, your support of Gaza, Gaza was ruled by Hamas as a governmental agency and as a terrorist network. They're one and the same. That leads us to our next story. Trump administration freezes $2.2 billion in grants to Harvard over campus activism. And that activism is indeed what I said, which is support of Hamas. That's the thing. So if it's, understand, even if you're supporting Gaza, the country of Gaza, whatever you want to call it, that piece of land there was governed by a terrorist, or at least as the United States considers them a terrorist organization, which is Hamas, which is the governing body in Gaza, but also the fighters are all Hamas. And more importantly, is Hamas, even though they're Sunni, is controlled by Hezbollah and Iran, which are Shia. I don't know how that all started or how it works out. But it's certainly of concern. All right, that wasn't that long. It was a short episode today. Thanks for joining me. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, and share the podcast. So tonight, Tuesdays with Perry, I think it's episode 113. So join us about 9:15 live. Remember, you're under attack psychologically and biologically. So if you feel the need to go out and commit violence, just don't do it. Understand that motive inside you came from somewhere else. Join me every day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. live stream on Rumble. Check me out on social media, X, Facebook, Getter, My True Social, Substack. Check out my other website, libpop.org. Learn about libertarian populism. Stay hip to the trick. I'll see you tonight. Respect.
You can't handle the truth.
The New World Order. The New World Order.
Soulful radio. Soulful house music. And I found out the more songs